It was my pleasure to speak with Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum again, and this time our discussion centered around the challenges of sleep in fibromyalgia, ME/CFS, POTS and related syndromes. Whilst most of us instinctively know the importance of sleep to feel well, the research around the impact of sleeplessness in this group of illnesses is pretty clear, so it makes sense to give it plenty of attention. But what is normal sleep? How can we restore sleep? Is it medications, herbs, or some other remedy? We discuss the importance of a structured approach and peel back the layers, including the neurological training components of sleep restoration. Those of you in the ANS Rewire program will already recognize many key insights, but hopefully this podcast will help you to work more effectively with your physician towards sleep normalization to accelerate your recovery progress. Let's get into it. Just a short but important message regarding the content of this podcast. The ideas, concepts, and opinions expressed in this recording, website, and associated media and products are intended to be used for educational and information purposes only. Nothing presented is intended to replace your physician, nor are they a substitute for medical diagnosis, advice, or treatment. This podcast is provided with the understanding that the authors, guests, speakers, and publishers are not rendering medical advice of any kind. Well, I am very excited to have Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum on Wisdom from the Other Side. He certainly knows about Wisdom from the Other Side because he has been on both sides of the ledger, including being a patient and recovering, as well as being a physician and having been a patient himself. And he is, of course, the famous author of From Fatigue to Fantastic, with a lovely, very attractive new blue color compared to the iconic yellow that he had for some decades. And he's coming here today to speak about sleep. Hi, Jacob. Thanks for joining us on Wisdom from the Other Side.
Dan, it's a pleasure being with all of you today because sleep is a critical part of regenerating our body systems, whether it's the biochemistry, whether it's healing pain, whether it's anti-aging, all these different things. And how to get a good night's sleep, what is a good night's sleep, different tools. We're going to talk about all that today. You will be a sleep expert, but more importantly, you're going to finally know how you can get a good night's sleep, which for those of us with CFS and fibro can be a major challenge. So shall we get to it? And we'll teach people how to optimize sleep.
Well, it's funny, nobody really thinks about sleep until they don't have it anymore. And it makes us think, well, what is normal? And we talk about the number of hours that people sleep, which tends to reduce as people age. But there's a lot of talk about how modern life has impacted sleep. And it's interesting, I was having a look at some research which kind of suggested that we used to have different kinds of sleep patterns. But people suggested that we used to have 2 sleeps a night instead of just 1. And perhaps we didn't have that many more hours than we do these days. I mean, I'm not so sure about that. Yeah, that's my response too. But what are your thoughts on that? What do you think is normal?
Well, looking at the medical anthropology, if you go back 150 years ago when Thomas Edison was inventing light bulbs, the average night's sleep in the United States, average, was 9 hours a night. We had already been moving away from the biphasic sleep patterns. The medical anthropologists say if you go back 5,000 years ago, before the modern era or industrial era, that the average night's sleep, sun went down, and unless there was some celebration or festival, it was dark, boring, and dangerous outside, people went to bed. And the sun came up, and people woke up. So the average night hours, it basically was 11 hours of sleep a night, is what they estimated. But what they found is that people tended to sleep, if you had a village, people would tend to have a 2-hour block where they would wake up, and it was different times of night, so there would always be somebody naturally awake in case there was an attack or an emergency to sound the alarm. And this time is used for meditation, prayer, sex, introspection, looking at dreams, kind of quiet things like that. So the biphasic pattern is not unusual in human history. It's pretty common. But even that took it down from 11 hours a night to 9 hours a night. We're now down to 6.75 hour a night average because, again, since light bulbs were invented, light, TV, radio, cell phones, Facebook, God, and it goes on and on, we're down to the 6.75 hour. That's a 30% pay cut to the body. And one of the major reasons we're seeing chronic pain affecting 1/3 of the population, obesity, as well as fatigue and chronic fatigue syndrome. In most of the population, they have poor sleep because they don't make the time. Where in our population, it's because the sleep center's not working.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are being robbed by late night entertainment as well. And I have to say, it's interesting. Obviously, I remember the first night good sleep I had as I was recovering. And I remember waking up and bewildered at what had happened. How did I get to repeat to the other day, and the way it feels in my body. And certainly, since I've been recovered and I've enjoyed good health for many years, I did have a period where I had sleep issues due to another medical issue where I had appendicitis and an abdominal pain for a period of some months. And I have to say, even as a well person, as soon as you take off a few of those hours, the level of vitality that you have, I mean, it just plummets dramatically with sleep, doesn't it?
Our sleep is critical to avoid being in pain. We get normal little micro tears in our muscles throughout day and day from normal use. And the growth hormone is what repairs those tissues. And the research shows if you take somebody, they did a med they'd wake them every time they go into deep sleep, they just shake them out of deep sleep for 24 to 36 hours, and they would develop widespread pain.
Right, right. So tell me, do you think there is a difference in terms of when we got to sleep? There's a lot of talk about getting sleep before midnight and whether we sleep late in the day. And I guess I haven't been necessarily convinced by this. So I was curious what your take was on it.
Well, what size shoe is the best size for everybody?
Mm.
There's no best one. This is not a one size fit all thing. Just like there's no one diet that's best for everybody. There's no one shoe size that fits everybody, and there's no sleep is not one size fit all either. There's some people who are night owls. There's some who are early to bed, early to rise, and it depends. I mean, for most of my life, I've been a night owl. In fact, in med school, they called me the ghost because 2 in the morning you'd find me in the medical stacks in the library going through and just pulling journals off and reading them. As I was a card-carrying certified geek, I still am. I had my 70th birthday 2 weeks ago, so I've been shifting since I moved to Hawaii, a little more to the sun, be in bed by 9 p.m. kind of a thing, 9 or 10 instead of 2 to 3 in the morning. And it varies. It's, how much time per night, the average night sleep that I think is optimal is 8 to 9 hours. But for some people, they can get 4 hours of sleep and they feel fine. Others need 10. And the bottom line, again, when people say, well, this is the way you should do it, tell them, thank you. Yes, that's the way you should do it. And then notice what feels the best for you. Because what works the best for you is how I recommend you do it. But first, let's give you the tools so you can do what feels best to you.
Do you know, that's my sentiment exactly, Jacob. People often ask me about all kinds of things, and I often give them more wishy-washy answers. And I say, listen, at the end of the day, someone's opinion or experience is nice, but what really counts is what works, and what really, really counts is what works for you. So I love your approach. Okay, so let's talk about, what are the key strategies? And I mean, I guess the first question is, why is sleep disrupted? And I guess what is the first things we should be looking at? I mean, some people sort of want to throw the book at it right away, but I think it makes sense to approach it in layers.
Okay, so layer number one. For those of you who have kids, you know the importance of a good sleep routine for your children to be able to go to sleep. You don't have them running like crazy people and then go and watch them have the story of the headless horseman riding around or whatever and say, okay, in bed now, honey, while they're still kind of like this. You say, okay, which princess do you want to watch tonight? And what's the show? And even if it's a little scary, if it's not really for the kids because they're familiar enough with it that they have their routine that is signaling their psyche that it is time to shift from the adrenaline part of the nervous system, sympathetic, over to the what's called old man after dinner, or the parasympathetic part of the nervous system that supports sleep. When it comes to sleep, we are just big kids. You want a bedtime routine that signals that it's time for calm. You don't want to watch CNN or Fox, whose the main mantra of these organizations are truth, who gives a damn, just scare them to death and make them hate each other. You know, and God bless them. They're all nice people. I'm on both of them. I've never met one of them who wasn't to love. But it's like the editors, the old story of the editor, the newspaper editor of 100 years ago, or the new cub reporters, what they call them in the United States. And the kid comes in and says, I just saw this dog bite a man on the way over to the studio. Can I write about it? And the old editor with a stogie says, dog bites man, boy? That's not news. Got a man who bites a dog? That's news. So, you know, what you would, looking at the news, you'd think that men are running all over the place biting dogs. And most of the stuff on the news is a fiction meant to scare you to death and make you hate each other and to fulfill the needs of their advertisers and owners. I don't mind fiction. I'm a science fiction fantasy geek and a buff, but I like my fiction to be labeled fiction. So I recommend, you know, how did Mark Twain say, you know, if you don't read the news, you're misinformed, you're uninformed. But if you do read the news, you're misinformed. And Jefferson, who's one of the founders of the country, basically said he stopped reading the news and he has not found that he's missing anything. And I don't think it's gotten any better since then. So I recommend for most of the stuff, turn it off. I mean, with the Ukraine thing, I've been watching just to see how the propaganda works in each country and what the responses are. I'm a political science major in my old incarnation. But turn all that stuff off. Don't be paying bills right before bedtime. You want a calming bedtime routine, calming music, calming book, an old TV show that, like Friends or something that you've seen 100 times before, Seinfeld, something where you know what it's going to be. You can say what the next lines are because it's just an old, familiar, blanky kind of thing that will soothe you and ease you off to sleep. So create that setting of a bedtime routine. Then you also want to keep the room dark. Another study just came out this month showing that if the room has even enough light, and this is actually we'll be reporting on this in my newsletter that's going out tomorrow. If there's even enough light that you can't read by, like a night light, it forces your brain into the sympathetic system, staying awake and alert, which is what keeps you from going into deep sleep. If you are on sympathetic drive through the nighttime, you're going to find that deep sleep suffers. That's restorative sleep. So using a little night mask, you know, one of those, if you've ever been on an airplane, or, you know, they have a bunch of different ones, cheap, simple ones, that just keep the light out. It will improve sleep quality, and it also, what the study showed, is that it causes weight loss because it triggers the insulin resistance when you're having the light on during the night. So keep it dark in the room. Keep the temperature optimal for you, for what feels best to you. So all these little things, you know, are simply setting the context for a good night's sleep.
Well, it's very interesting, and you know, people talk about there being a physiological reason why we struggle with sleep when we have CFS and fibromyalgia. We don't tend to talk that much about the psychological side because we get so bashed over the head by people suggesting that we're not really ill, you know, and saying it's psychological. But I have to say, when it comes to sleep, there is a really significant psychological side. And, you know, as you're talking about this bedtime routine and getting that feeling, relaxing and familiar, nothing too stimulating, I think for many of us, once we have a problem with sleep and once we have an experience with insomnia, sleep becomes an issue. And so as we move towards our bedtime routine, there's often a raising of anxiety because we're going to go to sleep, I have to sleep, and we're going to sleep tonight. And of course, that is the very thing that's going to stop you sleeping, right?
Yeah.
So this is a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing, isn't it?
Yes, it's old patterns, and breaking those patterns Well, that's what a big part of what you're about. You're teaching the plasticity of creating, using that for new patterns. Um, and it makes a major difference. And there's so looking at behavioral patterns is just like when you take medications and supplements, and you've taken so many things that make you react. You have a pill in your hand, you wonder, uh-oh, what's this going to do? And you're already breaking out in the hives or something, just and shakiness. And it's called the uh-oh response, like the Pavlov response of conditioned response. So doing things to break that pattern, um, just creating a new routine of success for sleep. Things like what ANS Rewire will be teaching, would be a major thing. But it's important to realize this is not only pattern, and it's not only the context and environment. The hypothalamic dysfunction, the hypothalamus is the sleep center. The hypothalamus is all about regulating temperature. So if it's what keeps the temperature at the optimal level, it controls the hormones that regulate thyroid and temperature thing. Your temperature has to drop to be able to sleep, so the sleep center is wrapped in the hypothalamus. All of this is in that circuit that goes offline. And because of that, I have no problem at all, in addition to the sleep hygiene and the brain retraining, adding in herbals and natural things and medications to get the sleep that's needed, and then also retraining the brain, and then weaning off of the things. But let me give you a concept that may be foreign but is critical. Low energy equals poor sleep. Now you're going to think, no, energy is stimulating. It's going to keep you awake. It's going to keep you from sleeping. But it's quite the opposite. The hypothalamic control center, that's the circuit breaker in the brain, about an almond-sized area, part of the limbic system. And when energy level drops, this is the first area to malfunction. The hypothalamus uses more energy for its size than any other area in the body. And that's why it acts like a circuit breaker. That's why its energy drops. That center and sleep center drops, and the ability to sleep drops. So things that improve energy without being stimulating, that are basically healthy energy instead of energy loan sharks, improve sleep. For example, there are 3 studies that we've completed, actually 4 studies, in the last about 2.5 years, testing different natural compounds that increase energy production. And each of them showed that the increase in sleep was on the order of about 45% improvement in sleep by improving energy from any of a number of directions. So the whole SHINE protocol that we use in the placebo-controlled double-blind published research showed that fibromyalgia and CFS and ME 91% improved, with an average 90% increase in quality of life, improving energy production. So don't forget the importance of that, and we'll talk about that more as we go on, about the studies, things that you can do naturally to optimize energy, not necessarily only by sedating yourself, but by energizing the systems that control sleep so you can work, as you can sleep.
Yeah, look, it really resonates, Jacob. I mean, it's this requirement for a multilateral approach, and I personally have had, during my recovery, great success with some orthomolecular approaches, specifically around serotonin and melatonin, and the use of 5-HTP. In fact, I remember within a short period of time of taking 5-HTP, that was when I had that sleep in the morning where I woke up and go, "Wow, what happened?"
Mm-hmm.
and so it wasn't done in isolation, but nonetheless, I felt very sure that it had an impact. Tell me, how do you like to layer it? Is it a herbal approach first, then orthomolecular, then medications? Is that how you approach it?
I like to begin with melatonin. I like a mixed immediate and sustained release melatonin, or even predominantly there's EP120 sustained release melatonin that's very good. That's 10 milligrams. I've been going with higher dosing because initially I would give 0.3 milligram, but as we now have over 30 years experience under our belts using it, the higher doses seem quite safe and quite helpful. I will go ahead and use herbals, valerian, passion flower, the hops. There's a reason beer helps people to sleep. 5-HTP, the 200 to 400 milligrams. If you're taking an antidepressant that raises serotonin, I keep it to 200 milligrams, or even don't use it if you're a high dose of antidepressant. Takes about 6 weeks to see the full effect. That was one of the first things studied in a double-blind study to help fibro pain. There's a 5-HTP. I'll tend to use essential oils, lavender, ravensara, different things along those lines. So in the U.S., there's two products. One is called Revitalizing Sleep Formula. The other is Terrific ZZZZ. But again, for the rest of the world, I think it's going to be easier to just know the component things.
Ingredients.
So I tend to start with those things. The magnesium at bedtime, about 200 milligrams of magnesium, helps settle restless leg, helps relax the muscles. So this is kind of the order that I'll start with, and I have no problem combining them all pretty quickly. I'll give each thing a day or two to see what it's going to do, even though the 5-HTP takes 6 weeks to see the full effect. You'll see some effect same day. Same with the magnesium. The others you'll know the same day. Then I'm going to tend to go for specifically for sleep. I'm going to tend to use the Z medication. There's a couple of key parts of sleep. One is initiating sleep or falling asleep. That's a very different thing than maintaining sleep. So I will tend to go with medications. I know Zolpidem and Zopiclone have their problems. But for initiating sleep, the Z drugs I find to be very helpful in this disease, and I'm quite comfortable using them in people who need them and are not able to adequately fall asleep with the others. We don't see addictive issues unless people are going over 12 milligrams a day of the Zolpidem, 12.5 milligrams. What you do see is rebound insomnia. You don't stop it suddenly. If you've been on it for months, you're not going to sleep for 10 days. You have to decrease it by 2.5 milligrams every 2 months, and it's not hard to wean usually. And Trazodone, 25 to 50 milligrams, where the usual dose is 300 to 450. Cyclobenzaprine, 2.5 to 5 milligrams instead of the usual 10 3 times a day, just one at bedtime. Gabapentin, that's being attacked now because they find drug addicts use it. Why? Because it helps their pain. And it does make the other drugs more effective that they're taking. But it is much safer than the ibuprofen. You have two studies in the British Medical Journal that showed that arthritis, ibuprofen-related medications, which are pretty useless for fibro, caused over 50,000 U.S. deaths a year. The news media, you didn't hear a peep about it because they're major advertisers. It was the odd thing. I still can't get a report or two. These are two studies in British Medical Journal of 500,000 people each. Where with gabapentin, unless it's being taken with high-dose narcotics, there are usually 0 deaths, when taken in proper dosing. I find that very helpful for sleep. So I begin in terms of setting the context, setting the sleep routine, setting the sleep hygiene, adding the herbal things, then adding in the medications. And what I find, here's a critical concept. If I give you a high enough dose of natural or prescription to keep you asleep all night because of the severity of the sleep disorder, you will be hungover till 4 in the afternoon. Because it's all, you take something, here's how high in the blood it goes, and then it clears out of the body over a certain amount of time, called the half-life. Mm-hmm. But if I go ahead and if I give you enough that it's out of the body by morning, it's not high enough to keep you awake. If I give you high enough to keep you asleep, you're going to be hungover. But if I give you a low dose of 5 things, each of these is cleared out of the body on its own timetable, has its own what's called half-life. It's not affected usually by the other medication. So each one is clear. But the effect, if you get a blood level here of one, and here of another, and here of a third, and here of another, that effect is all additive to keep you out all night. But it's all out of the body by morning, so you're not hungover. So it's kind of like you go to a Chinese apothecary. They don't say, oh, here's a big bag of this herb. They have 50 little drawers behind them, and they pull out all the drawers, and they take a pinch of this, and a pinch of this, and a tiny bit of this, and a tiny bit of that, and they put it all together. That approach works better, in my experience, in people with CFS and fibromyalgia. And I will add one thing to the next, as long as it's comfortable, at a safe dose, and to adjust it to get the 8 hours sleep a night. Meanwhile, while you're working with resetting the limbic system, the ANS rewire, then as that starts coming back online, and then you can talk about timing of that and the rest more, now your own sleep center is working again, then in the reverse order we just gave.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, people always ask about. Many people don't like medications, and and I understand that, and they want to come off medications. And there's all kinds of medications. Let's face it, it's not, just about every medication seems to be prescribed to people with CFS and fibro, right? But one of the things that can happen is that when they withdraw too early in their recovery, it can trigger them again. And I always say, look, wait till you get to 80, 90% recovered, and then go very slowly, under your supervision with your doctor, and which one do you do first, and just take your time. I think people are often do too quickly. And mind you, I mean, I have seen people do it and actually, be okay. But I think it's reckless, and I think you need to nurture your recovery.
The way that I recommend it for people, because you want your body to learn that healthy is the new normal for you, I tell people, look, take everything you need, and then when you're feeling healthy and back to yourself for 9 months, in the SHINE protocol, using the ANS rewire, you're feeling back to yourself at 9 months. I pop the question, which is, are you ready to come off stuff? And about half of the people, and it's funny, it's almost 50-50, about half of people will say, oh, thank God, what can we start getting rid of? And then we start every 2 weeks, we drop a half a pill or a pill of something. You don't feel any worse, you don't need it, you're good, ready to do the next one. And then they can just wean down. I recommend long term they stay on a multivitamin and something for sleep, even if it's diphenhydramine or something, because that will put them at less risk of a stress pushing them over the edge of the cliff. So I do keep those two things. And then the other half of people, when I ask, are you ready to come off stuff, they say the only way you're getting any of this stuff away from me is out of my cold, dead fingers. Like, okay, well, there's nothing I'm giving that can't be used long term.
Yeah.
And then when the person is ready and it feels good to do so, that's the time. And there's no hurry in weaning.
Yeah, yeah. You can't push someone into it. They have to feel comfortable, because we don't want to increase anxiety in any way, do we? Um, Look, one of the things, just on the anecdote of 5-HTP, one of the things that seemed important is when to take the 5-HTP and what else to take it with. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on this, but at the time, I remember I'm being under the impression that having an insulin response at the same time that you're taking 5-HTP seemed beneficial, and so I would take the 5-HTP, yeah, with a, like a little nip of juice or something like that. Is this the case with any of the medications or supplements or herbals, that the timing of when you take it, or what you take it with, becomes important?
Not so much. But the thing is, taking a little nip of something can be helpful. And let's go through night sweats, waking up at 2 in the morning. We talked about initiating sleep. But how do you maintain sleep? So in terms of whether the change in the insulin would affect its conversion to the 5 from 5-HTP to serotonin, one can make an argument. You're probably right with it. But I could also make the argument that giving something sweet at night will trigger their blood sugar to drop about an hour later and wake them up.
That's
So
right. I totally agree with
that
you, and that's always my concern too.
yeah, and that's why I was going. So with that,
Yeah.
so with most medications, it's more this, except for the Z medications, Zopiclone, Zalplan, those kind of things, which you take 20 minutes before bedtime or right at bedtime. The other things I usually have people take about 60 minutes before bedtime, even 90 if they need, whatever it takes to be kicking in around that time. For those who find that their mind is wide awake and racing at bedtime, that's usually tired all day, They get irritable when hungry or hangry from low blood sugar during the day. And then at nighttime, they've been tired all day, and now it's 10 o'clock, I'm ready for bed, and my mind is wide awake and racing. That's adrenal issues, adrenal fatigue.
Mm.
And the adrenal stress hormone is too low during the day. And at night, it needs to drop from a normal level of 18, or I guess in the European units would be about 680 during the day, and needs to drop under 40 at night, or under 1 at night, and the American units. If it doesn't, you're going to feel racy at night. So in those people, I will give phosphatidylserine as a supplement. I think it's probably over the counter in UK and Australia too. And I will go ahead and have them take 100 milligrams 90 minutes before bedtime for 1 or 2 nights. See how that does, and then 200 and then 300 milligrams. See what feels best. So you'll find that if that's the case, you'll know pretty quickly it'll stop that racing. and then that will facilitate going to sleep. If it doesn't help in the first few days at a dose, I don't bother with it. But that's 90 minutes before bedtime. And then, like I say, the Z medications are either 20 minutes before bedtime or just when you climb into bed. So those are the timing of things. But then what you're going to see is that 2 o'clock waking is like, like there's a universal alarm clock only heard by people with fibromyalgia and ME and CFS that goes off 2 to 4 in the morning, wide awake. And
it's like a startle response for some people, isn't it?
It's a
When literally
specifically
wake up like with a racing heart. Some people don't just wake up. Some people wake up and they're like,
exactly. It's an adrenaline response in many people.
yes.
So in part, the sleep stuff may be waking up, but especially if you have night sweats with it, there's a couple key things that are triggering. One, the blood sugar, because remember we talked about cortisol, stress hormone not being 18, it should be in the morning, but 14 to 12, and most people with fibro is too low. They get irritable when hungry. Goes down at night, needs to drop under 1, but they're hovering 2, so they're racy heart. But then in the middle of the night, and their blood sugar plummets, and they wake up wide awake because of adrenaline release from low blood sugar. A very simple, the cheapest test treatment you can do all in one is have a 1 to 2 ounce protein snack. Have a hard-boiled egg right at bedtime, because that will help maintain the blood sugar, not completely, but more stable, being more stable throughout the night, and may help. And you'll know quickly if that's helping. It doesn't hurt if you have 2 hard-boiled eggs too. So number 2 would be perimenopause. Are you waking up in a sweat? Especially if you're a woman in her 40s, 50s, and the estrogen is going, especially if you're fibro, and I'm going to use fibro, CFS, and ME interchangeably. Yes, they're all different, but for purposes of today, the overlap is enough. We can do that. So if you find that your symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, insomnia are worse around your menses, that is diagnostic of low estrogen and progesterone, regardless of the blood tests, contributing, and regardless of your period still being fine, contributing to the illness, and using bioidentical hormones would be worth considering to help support and supporting sleep. Progesterone, even if you had a hysterectomy and ovaries out, progesterone is critical for sleep. Not the synthetic poison, but the bioidentical. The synthetic poison, synthetic estrogens, were made for a very, 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 very important purpose. It's because they were patentable and therefore they were profitable. But as far as your body's concerned, it's like, I want what my body makes. I don't want this synthetic kind of a thing because it's not the same molecule. I don't want a pregnant horse urine estrogen, is what they're giving because it was patentable. So I will use bioidentical with the exception of things like birth control pills. There are some things that the synthetics play a role. If there's infection and you're breaking up with sweats in the middle of the night, again, candida, where you have chronic nasal congestion, sinusitis, gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, those are markers of candida overgrowth. The sweats will wake you up at night. You need to treat the candida for the fibromyalgia to go away. There is no test that is reliable for that. So you'll see these different things that will trigger a middle of the night adrenaline release because the infections do that just like a cold or flu will. And addressing these things then can help the sleep quality. Sorry if I got a little long-winded there, but that's
No, no,
kind of
I appreciate that. In fact, kind of answered a couple of questions I was going to ask because in the ANS Rewire program, we speak about the role of hypoglycemia and how it triggers the autonomic nervous system as one of several physical triggers and why it's important to improve our insulin resistance, or should I say, improve our insulin sensitivity. And obviously diet's a part of that activity as we start to recover and are able to increase our activity can play a role in that. And just like yourself, I talk about the importance of having something to eat late in the
protein.
evening,
Protein.
like a protein snack, like an egg, fat. And obviously, when we're sleeping, we're supposed to primarily be burning fat, as opposed to,
It
when you're inactive.
doesn't maintain the sugars as well, though.
But it doesn't maintain your blood sugar. That's exactly right. And so the issue is with many people as they make this change to their diet and they make sure they have a protein snack late at night, these wakings at 2 or 3 in the morning or these startle responses seem to disappear. but some folk still have the issues. And so you mentioning the infections and things makes sense. But I do wonder about fine-tuning the diet side of things. And I say to people often become very anti-carbohydrates. And I can understand, why that might be the case, but I do think they can still play an important role when we have an unbalanced hyperreactive system. There's a lot to be said about sort of dampening it by giving you a balance of nutrition. So whilst I still talk about the late protein snack at dinner time, I still encourage people to have a reasonable amount of carbs and nothing too sugary. I just wonder what your thoughts were on how to balance this and yeah.
There's no one diet that's best for everybody. Otherwise, there would be one plant or animal that would grow on the planet, and we wouldn't need all the rest, from a human-centric point of view, anyway. Um,
Mm.
Everybody has different things. We're all different things. I know in my lifetime, there's times that I'm vegetarian, there's times that I'm a meataholic, depending on the type of work I'm doing and how much grounding I need with the work. If I'm traveling around the world lecturing and I'm trying to go on a low-protein diet, I'm in trouble. Where other kind of work, the carb diet. So basically, low sugar, high salt. Those two are your friends. Um, the most people find a high carb diet. A high protein diet works best for them, especially if they have adrenal fatigue. But some people on a low carb diet will go depressed, and some people will thrive on a vegan diet, and others look sick as death. So
Mm.
again, how do you tell the best diet for you? How is that working out for you? How does it feel? You try
So
different things. Now, again, you'll say, well, when I drink a 46-ounce soda with 39 spoons of sugar in it, I feel great. Yeah, how about a day later? It's like, so how's the feel? How's the working out for you? See what feels best to you. A lot of the stuff, we have this bizarre thing. It's funny, the United States was populated by people who were so Puritan that they were such a pain in the ass that people at shotgun point said, you get on the boats and go. And they said, we're going to fall off the end of the earth. Well, if you don't go, we're shooting you now. They're so annoying, telling people that however the universe was created, whether God, evolution, whatever it was, that whoever did it was such a maniac that everything that felt good to us is evil and bad. It's like, who would do something like that? Evolutionarily, no sense at all. A loving
quite the
God?
opposite, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
generally, the things that feel good to us are good. Now, with the exception of some things that have addictive issues like sugar or heroin
Mm.
or stuff like that. But overall, bacon, butter, eggs, coffee, these are all healthy foods. And until the food processors get hold of them, then they try to fool the taste buds. So see what
Mm.
feels the best to you, see what leaves you then feeling the best, and let that be your guide for what diet is best.
Yeah, personal experimentation is absolutely essential. I totally agree. Um, so there's other issues though around sleep. You mentioned obviously, some of the infections and things like that that can be part of the startling in combination with the hypoglycemia. Um, but I guess a number of other illnesses that sometimes people find themselves experiencing. One that I find that comes up surprisingly more than you would think, because it's not just with folk who are overweight, but also other folk is sleep apnea.
About a third of people will have sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome. Within sleep apnea, you have two main types. One is the person who has the nickname refrigerator because their shirt collar size in American units is 16 and a half inches or more, or 17 inches, and they're 280 pounds, and the tissues are thickening, just like you get fat put elsewhere in the body. It's the fat is filling the neck, and it compresses the airways like a balloon. That you have a little neck, you blow up the balloon, and those are the lungs, and you have the little neck that the air goes in and out of. And if that neck compresses, they stop breathing. It's as if you're suffocating them. And if they get in a position with all the fat, it's obstructive sleep apnea. The hallmark is that they are snoring and then they stop breathing and gasp. The other hallmark is not fatigue during the day. You can have that, but fall asleep easily at the wheel or watching the telly during the day. That falling asleep easily during the day in somebody with a big neck size who snores and maybe has hypertension because people
It's usually a car accident that leads to a diagnosis, isn't it?
That could be one thing. They fall asleep at the wheel, and it's like, oh,
I've
that.
seen that so often, where people
Mhm.
fall asleep at the wheel
Yeah,
and boom, they get diagnosed with sleep
yeah.
apnea.
But
Until then, they're completely oblivious.
yeah, a lot of times until they get, their wife gets taken in for spousal abuse because they keep elbowing them in the middle of the night, roll over on the side, and they're all black and blue. But here's the thing. So ask your spouse, your bedmate, do you tend to snore a lot in the middle of the night? Um, then notice if it's on your back. You can tape yourself, or there's a videotape yourself, and see if the snoring is mostly on your back. If so, then wear a tight nightshirt, pajama shirt, or t-shirt, and take a tennis ball, put it in a little plastic bag, and sew it or pin it to the small of the back of the nightshirt. This way, when you lie down on your back, you're lying on the tennis ball. That's not comfortable, and you will automatically roll on your side, which you're less likely not. But some people do have apnea on their side, but that may take care of it. And you'll know because you'll get less elbows in the side from your wife all night. So simple things like that. But unfortunately, even though a lot of people have sleep apnea, it's a very small percent who actually found that they feel better with the CPAP machine from the fibromyalgia. Um, if you have somebody who is the low weight, then you want to look at two other conditions. One is called central sleep apnea, where the brain signaling in the brain is not working. More common at high altitudes, but those people won't snore; they just stop breathing. The CPAP helps a little bit, but not. That sometimes will be significant, but that it's not as much. But here's the other thing: a third, very very common one, because you're talking about people with sleep apnea being big. And how about those little skinny bean poles that instead of high blood pressure have low blood pressure? Okay. Now you're looking at something called upper airway resistance syndrome,
Mm.
where the hallmark is thin, low blood pressure, orthostatic intolerance, and the nasal congestion. If they try to breathe through the nose, they can't. When I treat the candida using fluconazole for 6 to 8 weeks, a compounded prescription nose spray, things like that knock out the candida, well, then the upper airway resistance goes away and the upper airway resistance syndrome. So in those beanpole people, ask them, pinch it, can you breathe through your nostril? And if it's blocked up on both sides, have them get treated for candida unless it's seasonal with allergies or dust. So that's kind of how that breaks apart.
And so, how do you treat the candida? What did you say you
There's a
use for that?
medication, fluconazole. It's discussed in the book in detail, but the bottom line is
Yeah.
cut back the sugar because yeast grow by fermenting sugar. Um, you can use the artificial sweeteners; they don't ferment those. Use a good probiotic, even kefir, things like that can be very good. Um, Go ahead and use whatever natural antifungals are available. There's many.
Mhm.
Do a search online.
Yeah.
But then the key thing, those are by themselves don't quite do it. The medication, you're going to need a holistic doctor to get this, is fluconazole, diflucan in the United States, but Fluconazole, and 200 milligrams a day for 6 to 8 weeks. It's
Right.
about week 5 that people notice their gut and their sinus stuff starting to improve. But again, in the U.S., ITC Pharmacy makes the prescription compounded nose spray that's very, very good. And I can email, if you have a compounding pharmacy where you are, you can email me at fatigue doc, FATIGUETOC, at gmail.com, and I can send the recipe for your local compounding pharmacy to make the sinusitis nose spray. It'll need to be by prescription, though. Um, and I can also send information sheets on orthostatic intolerance, and even if you'd like, I can send copies of uh, the studies that we completed and even the data for the fourth study. And we may want to talk about that in a moment because these are things that have been really life changing for people.
Yeah, yeah, that was just on my list to ask you about that because you're continuously doing research and finding new ways, and I really appreciate your dedication. So tell us about these studies on these treatments around sleep.
Remember how we talked about at the beginning of the talk how optimizing energy production is critical for the hypothalamic sleep center to work. Um, and we looked at several things that we had found to be helpful, but also there was a new compound came out of Europe, and it's there's some of you may have heard about peptide therapies. Most holistic doctors are using it intravenously, and they're about $800 a pop, and they're quite expensive, but they're dramatically beneficial. But there's a fellow who was working with starving people in Africa with the hospitals dealing with malnutrition, and they found that they could make a peptide uh, from a serum peptide, the animal serum peptide. And what they were finding was that not just were these people recovering dramatically more quickly nutritionally, but all these different conditions, their fibromyalgia was going away, their rheumatoid arthritis was improving, all these different health conditions. And there's a colleague who's a friend of mine in Canada that I have a lot of respect for, and he said he had tried it because this person had sent it to him. And he said he has the fibromyalgia center at the hospital. He was seeing dramatic results. So we went ahead and I tried it in some of my folks, and it was turning people's lives around. And so it's called Recovery Factors. It's not available in the United States. The United States has a lot of regulation. And it's available everywhere in the world except the United States. For the UK, but you have to buy, because now with Brexit, you can't effectively ship less than 4 bottles without having to pay $50 to go through the regulatory thing for each shipment. So they have a minimum 4-bottle limit. The rest of Europe, Australia, so the 1 bottle. 1 bottle will be enough to tell you. In the study, we gave basically the 8 tablets a day, and it's a nutritional support thing. The side effects were near nothing. We saw a 60% of people improved with a 79% average increase in energy. It was remarkable. Wow. When the United States said you can't ship it in anymore, I've had people who went from crippled to being healthy, and now they're having to wait. They're doing what they can. It'll probably be about another 4 to 6 months before it's available in the U.S. U.S., God bless, I love the country, but the regulatory system is nuts. But in Europe, in Australia, in the UK even, you might, because 4-bottle minimum UK, you might want to get a friend or two to order it with. But the website is Recovery Factors, FACTORS.com. So RECOVERYFACTORS.com. If you're in the U.S., go and leave your email address. The company will let you know when it's available in the U.S. Or even in the UK if you're not able to do the 4 bottles at once. But after 1 bottle, that's when we saw the 79% increase in energy, 84% increase in overall well-being, 45.7% improvement in sleep. Cognition improved 52%. The anxiety went down 35%. Gut symptoms improved 50%. So, I mean, this was body-wide, which we see with a number of things. So the recovery factors is really a leap forward. I'm excited, looking forward to when I can get it for my patients again, but it's kind of, God bless America. Right. Anyway, but I'd recommend that for everybody with this condition, and just order 1 bottle, see what it does for you. It's life-changing for many people.
Is it available for folk who live in Canada and in mainland Europe?
Yes, everywhere but the United States.
There you go. There you go.
You know,
well, look, I guess some other conditions, I guess, is restless leg syndrome.
So here's the thing. For restless leg syndrome, low magnesium is a critical player. It's a dopamine deficiency, is what that is. And you'll see during the day, restless leg syndrome is during the day when it has this rhythmic kind of movement thing. It's technically called PLMD, periodic leg movement disorder, sleep when it happens at nighttime. The standard dopamine medications I avoid for people. The studies have showed that if your ferritin, which is a measure for iron, is under 60, it's considered normal if it's over 12, which researchers have said that the normal range for the iron test are, and researchers were kind of a quiet, low-key, understated kind of group. What they said is this normal range is insane. That's a quote. The studies show that if the ferritin level is under 60, giving iron will settle down the restless leg syndrome. Once it's over 60, you've seen all the benefit you're going to see. Taking magnesium at bedtime will help restless leg syndrome or PLMD. Gabapentin, very good sleep medication for pain, for pelvic pain syndrome, for fibromyalgia. helps restless leg syndrome, and the Z medications like zolpidem also helps restless leg syndrome. So these are usually I'm taking, and as mentioned, about a third of people with fibro have restless leg syndrome. But taking care in those cases, I simply will tailor the rest of the treatments that we're giving that they need anyway, and that knocks out the restless leg syndrome.
It's interesting. I think there's a very strong connection between ferritin and magnesium. I mean, when you look at a chlorophyll molecule and you look at a hemoglobin molecule, I mean, it's this huge complex molecule, right? And they're virtually identical, except the difference is one has an iron in the middle and one has a magnesium. And I know when uh, a family member of mine was very young, we had an iron deficiency, and all we wanted to do is pour in iron, is what the doctors wanted to do, and it didn't make a difference. And I sort of looked into it, and when I saw those two molecules, it made me wonder. And sure enough, once we started supplementing with magnesium, the iron deficiency went away,
Funny, isn't it? And the
right?
magnesium deficiency is arguably the most important nutritional deficiency in the Western diet. The average diet that has 600 milligrams does have 600 milligrams before food processing, and only 245 milligrams a day after food processing. The blood tests are not reliable because it's intracellular. You don't see it in the blood so much. Um, the easiest thing, and the form is important. I use the multivitamin. In the U.S., there's a vitamin powder called the Energy Revitalization System. If you don't like powders, there are tablets called Clinical Essentials. These are that's readily available on Amazon, maybe even overseas. Very good multi. The tablets have 150 milligrams of magnesium per two tablets. The powder has 200 of magnesium, along with 50 other key nutrients. So you don't need to be taking separate pills for this and that and the other. If you have a good multi, and most are not, but the Energy Revitalization System or Clinical Essentials, either of those two are excellent. So it's easy to be getting all these things. I don't supplement iron though unless the ferritin is under 60, because then it becomes toxic.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But I guess we move towards finishing up here. Um, we spoke about the psychological side of sleep as well as the physiological side, and I just want to point out that I think that from a psychology point of view, it's not just about psychology, the psychological factors stopping you with sleeping, but it's also how able we are to actually engage in strategies. And sometimes I'll speak to folks and say, "Oh, I've tried it all, I've tried everything, and then nothing has worked." And I think it becomes so uh, easy to just feel overwhelmed, and we need to really be systematic about it. We need to actually say, am I actually doing that? Am I actually making those dietary changes consistently? Am I taking these herbs? Have I tried to add one and see if that helped? And then have I kept that and added another layer? Because often people look for that magic bullet, and I think they hop from one strategy to the other as opposed to building them. Um, is that been your experience as well?
Yes, and it's funny because I lecture all over the world, and if I had a dollar for every time somebody came, well, I've tried everything. And I said, well, have you tried this? Well, no, and that? Well, no, and this? No, have you tried anything? Yeah, so it feels like you've tried everything. You've been through all the stuff, but once you organize it, that's part of what the book does. Is just that organizes the whole thing. Here's how you do it. These are not forever things. These are get the systems working. They're like crutches, and then when you're feeling well for 9 months, you can start tossing the crutches. Do the ANS rewire. That's a critical part of the system that needs to be reset because if the circuit breaker is not working and you're taking 20 medications and supplements to take care of what the circuit's doing, or you turn the circuit back on, duh. So the
Yeah.
the ANS rewire is a critical part, resetting those systems. Um, and then there's two other supplements that we studied. One is called HRG80 Red Ginseng, but that one also 67% average increase in energy and 46% in sleep, and just one chewable tablet a day. But most ginsengs don't work. It's called HRG80 Red Ginseng. And then the other thing, just briefly, is called the Smart Energy System. These two are just available in the United States, though. But the Smart Energy System, you can find on Amazon, or you can find most of these except recovery factors at endfatigue.com. We do ship overseas, but it's pricey.
Yeah, look, and Jacob, you mentioned your wonderful book, which has been around for a long time and keeps getting updated. But I've got to say, the book's great, but if you don't have pen and paper alongside with it in your strategy, you might find yourself in trouble because you've got to be systematic. Okay, I'm taking this, I'm trying this time. What's happening with my sleep? And to look in your book and just go, oh, there's one thing, I'll try that. It's not going to do it. You've got to follow the system of the book. And if you're not using pen and paper, I think you're in trouble.
Well, that's why we have the brain fog friendly summaries in the beginning of each book.
Nice.
That gives, here's the key things in half a page. So you can go through all of that in maybe an hour. And it's organized. And there's the free energy analysis program, which is basically, we hold a U.S. patent for computerized doctor that we made for people with fibro. And we had told people, well, it's $400 to do it, but if you couldn't afford it, it's free. And 80% of people wrote back, I'm impoverished with fibromyalgia. My wife and I just made it free for everybody. But it's energyanalysisprogram.com. It's a 15-minute quiz. We'll analyze your symptoms, even your blood tests if you have the blood tests that are pertinent, and say, here are the key things draining your energy, and here, and prioritized, are the key things to restoring energy. So there's all kinds of ways to organize it. But yes, organizing it is critical, or you're going to get back to what you're feeling like you tried everything when you've tried nothing.
Yeah. You've got to get away from that shotgun approach and be methodical. And look, when you're working with a wonderful physician, that's great because they'll do that for you. But a lot of people, they need to take control of this themselves.
They don't have an option.
Jacob, thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing your experience today. Sleep is so central. I'm sure there's a good reason why the SHINE protocol starts with it. And I appreciate you sharing all your knowledge. And I look forward to having you back another time on Wisdom from the Other Side.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Be well, everybody.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the podcast. We hope you felt supported by it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via cfsunravel.com, and make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. And you can leave a comment and a 4 or 5-star review if you feel so inclined. If you want to make sure you get your free copy of Discover Hope and get notified about all new recovery resources and interviews, including recovery interviews, subscribe to us via the website. Check out some of our other podcasts. I hope you'll join us again soon.